Welcome to the July Family Council Empowerment Program, all. I'm Haley Cronquist. I'm the policy attorney with the Long-Term Care Community Coalition. Thanks so much for joining us today. Before I hand it over to Janine, I just want to say a quick thank you to Janine and to Gloria, who have led this program over the past year and a half. Unfortunately, our program is coming to an end after today's program, which is really unfortunate because it's been such a great and successful program. It's been so inspiring to see all of the family councils that they were able to create and to assist, and I hope that those family councils and others continue to flourish and to make a difference. I just want to let you know that the family empowerment resources will continue to be updated and available on Nursing Home 411, as well as the Nursing Home 411 Zoom room. So if you need a private place for your family council to meet via Zoom, please reach out to us. We'll still be able to schedule you for that. And thank you all again. Thank you to the family members and the advocates and the ombudsman and everyone who's really made this program so successful. We really do believe in the family or the power of family councils in advocating for better care. So just want to say thank you so much. And now I will hand it over to Janine to introduce today's speaker and get us started.
Thank you, Haley. And thanks for mentioning that we are coming to an end, but that doesn't mean that you don't need to focus on your family councils and build, form, and maintain them. Today, we have the distinct pleasure of speaking to Dr. Elan Caspi, a gerontologist and an avid researcher on retaliation. He's been working with ombudsmen, resident councils, and he's doing some research as well with family councils. So welcome, Dr. Caspi, Elan. We're really excited to have you here and to listen to what you have to teach us and to ask you questions. Everyone, please feel free to raise your hand and ask questions in the latter part of today's presentation, which is being simulcast on Facebook. Thanks.
So thank you, Janine and Haley, for inviting me to speak with the families and others. Perhaps there's ombudsman today with us. I'm not sure, but I hope so. In any case, today we're going to talk about a concerning issue that has to do with residents when they are fearful of retaliation, when they want to voice concerns about right violations, their care, or even mistreatment. And it really touches upon many aspects of care, if you think about it for a moment. And before, when I was preparing for this presentation, it keeps coming back to me, this question that I want to raise, the reflection question, no need to answer it, is when did fear enter long-term care homes? What does fear have to do with care at all? How did we get here? The reason why I'm saying it is because I'm currently doing a second project on this issue, and it is obvious that the fear of retaliation is common, it's prevalent, it's harmful, it's underreported, it's not tracked in many cases, and it really prevents residents from realizing their rights and holding providers accountable. Now, before I start, I want to mention that someone who started working in a nursing home as a nurse, say 30 years ago, where my grandfather lived, I want to say that the majority of care staff members are caring. They are compassionate, and they want to do good work. However, oftentimes they work in broken systems, and we can get to that in a minute. I also want to mention, because we're speaking with families, I want to mention that there's a big difference between regulatory standards in nursing homes versus assisted living residences. And so we're probably going to get back to that as well. And in nursing homes, many of you know, it's the federal regulations that set the standards. And then through contracts with the state survey agencies, but in assisted living residences, They are regulated by states, and it varies. The quality, the scope varies from state to state. So when talking about this issue of residents' fear of retaliation when voicing care concerns, it's important to recognize the asymmetry of power that exists in those care settings, what is called the power imbalance. Most residents in nursing homes are physically and or cognitively dependent on staff for meeting their basic care needs, and it can be very scary to voice concerns and file complaints against individuals who you are, could be fully dependent on. A lot of residents have serious complex health conditions, so it's really, really scary for them. As residents tell us again and again, you get to go home. I have to stay here 24/7, nights, weekends. So we really have to be careful so it won't backfire. And that's one of the things that experienced and professional ombudsmen can help families navigate this complex challenge. An early study at UConn by Professor Julie Robison found that nearly 1/4 of nursing home residents surveyed reported that they worry that they will experience retaliation if they voice care concerns. That is something that is, an ombudsman told me that when she trained to be administrators, she told them, when you walk up to a resident in the dining room, in their bedroom, keep that statistic in your mind. Every fourth resident might worry about being retaliated against for voicing care concerns. Now, we also need that study that I mentioned also found in my study and my subsequent quality improvement project that I'm doing now that I'll share with you a little later about demonstrates overwhelmingly that fear of retaliation can be just as fearsome as the retaliation itself. It's a real force. It can, as one nursing home resident in Connecticut said years ago, it can really paralyze an individual from speaking up. And as I believe she also said, right, there may not be a dictionary definition for this issue. Residents who live in care homes know exactly what it is. So my research study was about the lived experience of residents in 100 nursing homes in over 30 states in their own words. What does it mean to be afraid of retaliation? And as I mentioned, this issue is confirmed by 47 ombudsmen from 32 states in my recent project that it's real, it's valid, it's longstanding, it's multifaceted, it's complex, it's harmful, it's prevalent, it's underreported, and it's untracked. So we have a lot of work to do on this issue. Now, I was deliberating today whether to go with PowerPoint slides and show you the findings from my study about the fear, the threats, and the actual retaliation. And I thought, I'm speaking with family members. Do I really want to upset you and scare you? So I decided to take a more balanced approach. And I will say this, and I'm happy to share the PowerPoints afterward, the PowerPoint slides, for those of you who want to take a look at what some of the things that can happen in those low-performing, neglectful, and abusive care homes. There are literally dozens of ways in which staff can retaliate against residents. And it can be anywhere from not bringing you your glass of water, a cup of water, to being slow to respond to your requests, your call bells, not responding at all for lengthy periods of time, coming to your room, turning off the call light, and leaving without addressing your needs, all the way to neglect of healthcare, leaving a resident soiled in adult dependence for hours, gross neglect, all the way to retaliatory wrongful discharges and hospital dumping. That's a term where they, for some reason, they want to get rid of the resident. And the resident has a, acute condition. They may go to the hospital, and then when they want to come back, they say no. And that's an example of where the regulatory standards are very important, and the difference between assisted living with weak regulations often versus nursing homes. Not that it's perfect in nursing home, but it's still you have something to work with. Okay, so it can also manifest in verbal and physical abuse. And think about it for a moment. You don't need a law. It's a law for the resident, but you can just do what is called rough care. You don't say a word. You provide the care in a more in a faster way, in a more impatient way, maybe with a particular facial expression or a gesture, and being rough with the resident. That's all you need. That could be terrifying for a resident. I want to also highlight the important distinction between subtle and blatant forms of retaliation and the spectrum in between, frankly. Again, all you need is a certain look or a gesture, body language and facial expressions. Don't dare reporting on me again. Confronting residents aggressively when they could be defenseless. They could be, they could be physically disabled in their bed without ability to defend themselves. They could be terrified. Some residents in my study, they sleep with the grabber. We know this stick that you can grab an object that you can't reach because you're physically disabled. They sleep with it next to them through the night, just in case that particular staff member will come and care for them. So I want to zoom out a little bit and talk a little bit about the culture. Okay, I'm not here to demonize all care homes. We have serious issues in many care homes, but it really comes down to the culture. So is this a culture that fosters fear of retaliation? Or is this a culture that truly, truly cares about the dignity, respect, and safety of residents? I want to also highlight a preliminary finding from my recent quality improvement project that focuses on ombudsman strategies for addressing fear of retaliation and actual retaliation from 32 states. There's a relationship between poor staffing levels and fear of retaliation and actual retaliation. This needs to be confirmed in a more structured, robust research, because my quality improvement project was not a study. I did a study on this phenomena, the lived experience that I mentioned earlier, and it's published, and there's the Long-Term Care Community Coalition put out a very professional report called They Make You Pay, Our Fear of Retaliation Silences Residents in American Nursing Homes, based on my study in 100 nursing homes. And I want to thank Eric Goldwyn, Haley, and Richard for their tremendous support with this project. So everybody can access that. So we also know that the quality of care can only be as good as the quality of support and education for direct care staff members. They are truly the foundation. And, they're being described as hero more recently, but they've been heroes from the first day that the first nursing home opened in America. But we were far from treating them as such. So if we're truly serious about quality care, we need to learn about the roadmap that fabulous organizations such as PHI, used to be called Paraprofessional Healthcare Institute in New York, developed a roadmap for over 30 years on how to lift up direct care staff members. So there is a way. I also want to say that a consistent theme in my current project with the ombudsman strategies to address this issue is that it starts from the top. There always could be bad apples, but it starts from the top. And when I say top, I say owners, and I say corporate office, and I say administrators. Sometimes administrators they are not empowered to take decisions. The reverse is that sometimes the source of the retaliation is the administrators. So we can talk about that too. So Are you, and I have overwhelming evidence in my current study, and a project, and I'm very excited. The difference between an administrator that is using this 30,000 feet approach behind closed door, you don't even know, you ask residents, they don't even know who the administrator is. And so not showing up, not coming to the floor, not role modeling, not sitting with residents and knowing their names and how their day, what can we do to improve your experience here? So the good administrators, where you have less fear of retaliation and less retaliation, they are on the floor regularly. They see concerns as an asset. They see grievances as a quality improvement vehicle, not a threat to the care home. So again, so we have the approach that listens and values and cherishes residents and families' input. And on the other hand, we have the dismissal feedback from residents and families. And there's also a lot of labeling. So she's a constant complainer. Is she? Maybe she is a strong advocate, as one ombudsman told me recently. So, okay, so I kind of, we can talk about it for hours, but I kind of maybe laid out some the basics, the general things that I'm thinking about when I think about this issue. So what can we do about it, right? And most of my work, I have to say, is focused with learning from ombudsmen and from residents. So I'm here to learn from you about, your experiences in family councils, because that's not my expertise. So I have to be honest and say it as it is. That being said, there's a lot of things that can be done, and I'm going to share with you some of my thoughts. So the first thing is to raise awareness, right? If you're not aware that it's a problem, you're not in a position to address. If you don't recognize that it's a problem, you're not in a position to adequately address it, because there's a lot of denial. We don't retaliate against residents. We never do that. So we need to educate all parties. And by that, I mean residents, families, staff, managers, directors of nursing, administrators, corporate office, owners. We need to educate them about what does it entail? What are the signs of fear of retaliation? And I can go through that if you want. What are the residents' rights? What are providers' responsibilities? What are the reporting requirements? And are we instilling a zero tolerance on this issue? Now, we know, and we should inform everybody, that the nursing home has a responsibility to protect residents from abuse, neglect, including retaliation. But we have reality check. We have challenges. We have serious staff shortages that started well before the pandemic. We have major issues with staff turnover, so very unstable staffing conditions. And we have agency staff who often don't know the residents, and they come for a short period of time, being paid much more, and they're gone. And we have situations where many staff members aren't aware that what they do or say to residents is perceived by residents as retaliation or a threat of retaliation. So there's a lot of work to do on education. I want to highlight that the National Consumer Voice for Quality Long-Term Care a couple of weeks ago came out with a fact sheet on this issue, and it's linked in my PowerPoint that I can share with you. So I recommend taking a look at it. So number one, awareness and education. The second thing we need to do is to empower. We need to empower residents through ongoing support and education. And we need to make sure that residents and families know the residents' rights, such as right to a dignified existence and self-determination, the right to exercise your rights without interference, coercion, discrimination, or reprisal. And we need to know that in nursing homes, CMS states that retaliation is abuse, and it must be cited. by state surveyors. In your case, if you're in New York, it's the New York Department of Health. Residents with dementia, with a nursing home, the majority of residents have dementia. And so they're often being, one of the problems we're seeing, and it's consistent with the stigma about this population, very harmful stigma. They're often being written off and dismissed. So there's a lot of misconceptions there because a lot of residents, and there's research that shows that residents, when you create the conditions for them to succeed, elder-friendly conditions and dementia-friendly conditions, many are able to report reliably about the quality of life in their early and even many into the mid-stage of dementia, but they're often being written off. What do you expect? They have dementia. They don't know what they're talking about. They're making it up. And they love to, one of the things they do is they refused. There's many ways to retaliate. One of them is in documentation. They refused. Ombudsman standing by the door said they did not refuse. They were begging for a shower. So I also want to mention that in the context of dementia, there's a particular type of retaliation against people in advanced stage of dementia that happens during provision of personal care, such as showers and assistance with bathing. It's called, I wonder how many of you heard the term reflex retaliation. So picture a situation when a resident, say with severe cognitive impairment, and there's a staff member providing assistance with a shower, but the residents may not recognize this staff member. Maybe it's an agency staff, or they simply don't recognize them because 10 people give them a shower within a week or a month. And so they become distressed, irritated, frightened. They feel like their dignity is violated. The staff are not listening to them because they're understaffed and they're thinking, how do I get to the next residence next door? So the resident starts to yell at the staff member or curse or even hit the staff member. And in reaction, the staff member may yell, curse, or hit the resident. That's called reflex retaliation. I was surprised to find that some ombudsmen never heard about that term. They're familiar with the concept, with the circumstances, of course. So education on that, we need training on that as well, with rejection of care. That's one of the terms used. Rejection, I should say, of undignified care. Because when you have video-based study that shows second by second what happens, it's not what he said or she said. You see that most often it's undignified, unprofessional care that triggered it. So, one of the vehicles that can help residents and families, really important, is care plan meetings. So think about a boat in the ocean, and there's 3 people in it, and each one is rowing in a different direction. That's a metaphor for the fragmentation of communication and communication slippages and breakdowns that we often see in care homes. So bring everybody to the table, the ones you want. And some of the best ombudsmen, they will say, if they attend those meetings, they would say, that the resident invited them, they would say, do you want these people in the room? Sending a clear message before the meeting even started that this is the home of the resident. It's not staff. It's not residents living in the workplace of the staff. It's staff working in the home of the residents. So bring everybody to the table, and then there has to be documentation, and the resident in nursing home has a right to receive a copy of it. So now now there's potential accountability. And I know there's a lot of, meaningless care plans and meaningless care plan documentation, etc. But it could also be a legal document. So, one of the strategies that ombudsmen use is staff reassignment. So there's a particular staff that may instill fear or threatens retaliation or abuses or retaliates. One of the things that ombudsmen do, they can work on staff reassignment. The problem, so meaning that the staff will not work with this individual. The problem is that in the context of workforce crisis, is that the resident may still see them caring for their roommate or in their bathroom, because guess what? That bathroom is shared by 4 residents, or in the hallway or in the dining room. So It's not so simple, but it's sometimes it can help. One of the things that many ombudsmen across the country suggest is find someone you trust. Remember about the asymmetry of power and the isolation. So perpetrators tend to isolate the resident and make threats not to speak up. So find someone you trust, that internal advocate, whether it's an aide, a nurse, a manager, a non-director staff. In my study like 20 years ago, it was the front desk staff who was a fierce advocate for a particular residence, who the residents they only trusted that particular individual. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a director staff member. It could be a clergy. What about social workers? Hey, not so simple. Often I worked as a social worker in a nursing home, and many of them are professional, experienced. They can really give voice for the residents. But guess what? Their paycheck is received from their employees from the care home, and they are often operate between a rock and a hard place. And guess what? Assisted living, again, vast majority don't have a social worker. They're not required to have one. Big problem. And guess what? Even in nursing homes, there's certain criteria that allow nursing homes not to hire social workers. And many of them don't have a degree in social work, so not so simple. One of the things that ombudsmen suggest is to try to work first collaboratively, in the spirit of collaboration, in a positive way. Really cherish the staff members. They're really working hard. So lift them up, support them, build close, trusting relationships with them, and maybe it will translate to the care that your loved one is receiving. So work collaboratively with staff and managers. Use the ladder approach, as one ombudsman said. Start low and go incrementally until it doesn't work, and then you have to escalate things, and there are ways to do it. Not all of them are effective. We can talk about it. So we need to break the isolation. That is exactly what the perpetrator is trying to do. So many ombudsmen, in many other words, told me, there is power in numbers. Power in numbers. The same for family councils. So I want to talk about one. I'm going to just 1 second check my notes here. Yeah, so one of the things you want to do is you want to find out if other residents experience similar issues, because it is not uncommon for residents to think, because of the isolation, that they are the only ones who are experiencing the same issue. And it could be a unique issue, but oftentimes other residents experience, because guess what? If a perpetrator is doing it to one resident, what's the likelihood that they're doing it to other residents, right? Or if it's a culture that is coming from the top to bottom. So, and that's one of the beautiful things that happen in resident council, that sometimes residents learn that other residents experience the same thing. And resident councils must be resident run, okay? Because I'll talk about challenges with resident councils in a minute, because that's a really critical vehicle to break that isolation and make a dent in the power imbalance that we talked about. So it has to be a group voice. So the idea of a resident council, my understanding, is that part of it is to avoid the singling out. If you speak up in your bedroom, that's where the asymmetry of power can play out. But if you speak as one voice, under a strong president of the resident council that takes the role seriously, and every month goes through all the residents in the care home and seeks feedback and documents it, and very organized and respected leader, then you can get some things done. But there's reality. But first, there's this culture of dismissal, and there's all kinds of tricks of the trade, and I'm going to share with you many of them. So be aware of the challenge, such as not respecting residents' wish to hold a private meeting. Many residents don't even know that they have a right to hold a private resident council. And providers don't inform them about it. Staff may intentionally interrupt, influence, control, take minutes certain way. Minutes are critical because they are the triggers for requirements to respond in writing by the care home. And the state survey agency often looks at those minutes, but there's all kinds of tricks with minutes, such as an administrator will take them and edits them to show the care home in a more favorable light. So all kind of stuff like that. And then not following through. So ombudsman will sit there and say, 1 second, you guys discussed this last month, and it sounds like they didn't know anything about it. So where's the follow through? So we need an audit trail of those issues. Know your rights related to resident councils, and ombudsman, experienced and professional ombudsman can educate you about it. The grievance process is critically important because that is a structured way to require a response in writing from the care home. What did you address? What you did not address, and why? So again, is the grievance process a threat or being perceived as a precious quality improvement vehicle? So remember, CMS in nursing homes states the right to voice grievances without discrimination or reprisal and without fear of discrimination or reprisal. It is an empirical question whether, to what extent, state survey agencies are enforcing it. Family councils, you, Janine, Gloria, and the ombudsman attending, if you're attending today, can teach me how to, enable residents to realize their rights and have families' voice heard. I want to highlight that ombudsman work is resident-directed. It's resident-directed advocacy. So they will first, even if you express the concern, they will likely first go to the resident to check on him, even if they have dementia, oftentimes. There could be, I don't know, there could be, if it's, they want it, because in observation, in advanced stage of dementia, there's a lot of things they can learn even from observation. And that's their main strategy there, oftentimes. So one of the beautiful things that are happening here in Connecticut is that under the fabulous leadership of Mairead Painter, they have a statewide resident council and a statewide family council. That means they connected, I think it was during the pandemic, they connected resident councils online, remotely, virtually, and now they're amplifying their voice and the education and the support that's going on. And the same with family councils. And they were already able to pass a few bills at the Connecticut legislature. So how do we, another way to balance the asymmetry of power? So you also have to be aware that if you involve the ombudsman, there's also could be a potential for retaliation. And the best, most professional, most experienced ombudsmen tell me again and again and again that they cannot guarantee that there won't be retaliation. Because again, you get to go home and I stay here. So, but one of the beautiful things about the ombudsman, so think about a typical nursing home in America: understaffed, undertrained, lack of nursing leadership, lack of assessment, no valuing concerns of residents, and moving fast. The instability that we talked about with the staff shortages, turnover, agency staff, very unstable environment. It's very distressing for residents, and also it's a recipe for neglect and abuse and retaliation. And then walks in an experienced and professional ombudsman who takes a magnifying glass, a big magnifying glass, and says, everybody, slow down. Slow down. And slowing down and seeing what actually happens. Because oftentimes it has to do with a gap in communication, a misunderstanding, a communication slippage. And with that magnifying glass, with slowing down, with bringing people to the table, with checking maybe the call light log, even though there's tricks of the trade there too. Because if you turn it off and leave and don't address the needs, the log will show that they address the need. And that's what many providers go by. But there are many ways in which ombudsman can help you help a resident identify the root cause of the issue. And many times it is solvable if there's a willingness, if there's receptivity, if the administration is receptive and willing and has that culture, the positive culture that we talked about. In fact, some of the best care homes, they welcome the ombudsman. Others, oh no, the ombudsman is here. What did we do wrong? Or hiding, or hiding behind the doors when the ombudsman speaks with the resident inside the bedroom, or changing a light bulb in the hallway, the maintenance. Suddenly, there was no issue, suddenly in front of the room, and being confronted professionally and respectfully and assertively by the ombudsman. And the maintenance guy profusely apologizes. So, yeah. So ombudsman is a tremendous resource. However, we need increased funding for the ombudsman program because many of them are understaffed. And 80% of them, as of several years ago, are volunteer driven, and volunteers are a precious resource for the organization. However, and they're critical in addressing this issue as well because they are boots on the ground. However, there's a lot of instability and a lot of turnover there, and it's a major issue oftentimes to recruit and retain them. So it is critically important to have a private, secure way for the residents to communicate with the outside world. As one resident with an early stage Alzheimer's told me in a study that I did years ago, why can't our voice be heard outside the walls of this building? So that's part of the isolation, right? And so is there an assistive technology? Is there a way? Many residents have iPhones, but guess what? Many of them don't. Some of them can't afford it, can't operate it, whether it's visual impairment, whether it's hearing impairment, physical disability, but there's assistive technologies, phenomenal things. One resident was completely paralyzed in 4 limbs, but was able to type through eye movements on a screen and formulating sentences. There are ways. In Connecticut, Mairead told me that one resident really wanted to participate in a resident council, but they were, I don't like the word bedridden, they were physically dependent to the point that they couldn't leave the bed. They put a projector in the room and projected the resident council directly to her bed. In Connecticut, they're using a QR code that the resident can, if they can't type their number, they can hover over a QR code and it goes directly to the ombudsman. How many ombudsman programs across the country use that? Some places use Alexa, call the ombudsman, connected to the call lights. Because sometimes staff retaliate by yanking the call light. Don't use it again. You used it 5 times in the last hour, and throwing it on the floor or out of residents' reach when they know that they're physically disabled. So you say, you ask for Alexa to call you ask for Alexa to call the staff, to call your family. How do we break those barriers? So a private, secure way to communicate. The other thing I would recommend highly is document. It's 3 things: document, and you got it, document. It doesn't hold a lot of value if it's a he said, she said, because oftentimes, guess what? They will listen to the staff. And even certain state surveyors will go first to the staff, and they're already tainted the identity or the concerns of the resident. Oh, she is a constant complainer. Don't even bother go to talk to her. She has advanced dementia. She has no idea what she's talking about. She makes things up. So again, if the administrator is the source, consider reaching out to escalate to the corporate office, but sometimes it's the owner because they call the shots. They say how many staff on the floor at each shift and how they're going to be trained and how we are hiring RNs or LPNs, because RN's scope of practice is much wider, much bigger, and the training and their assessment skills is substantially higher typically than an LPN. There can always be an LPN that is very experienced and professional, and it's a new RN, right? But you got the idea. Involving the state survey agency, however, in many states, they're weak and they're struggling. Manpower, training, understaffing. Many left during the pandemic, and there was a big report. You may have seen it. It's called Uninspected and Neglected, really bringing home how So I'm going to report you to the state survey agency. Go ahead. They're going to come back in 6 months. Half the staff are not here. There's no witnesses because the resident already passed away or, declined or moved to a higher level of care or moved to hospice. So be aware. Sometimes the retaliation is as such that you have to call the 911 police. And sometimes it gets to a last resort when you have to call, you actually have to involve the media. But again, always the fine line, the tricky, right? It could come and bite you. It could also backfire. So an ombudsman is oftentimes in a good position to help the family navigate that process and the resident. And it's a resident directed. It's what the resident wants to do, with the critical difference between best interest, what we professionals or families think is best for the resident, and sometimes we know, versus what the residents wants. We talked about self-determination. And sometimes what the resident wants is not what the family wants. And I'm saying it with all due respect to the families. And that's what the ombudsman will listen to, because they are resident-directed advocates. Of course, if you're in an advanced stage of dementia, the resident is, there are clear protocols under the new comprehensive and robust training for ombudsmen, where the family members are becoming the main point of contact for the advocacy and education. In last resort, ombudsmen tell me that the person might need, if it's a bad culture and they're not listening and they're dismissive and it keeps going and it's harming the resident and they're suffering psychologically, physically, medically, and abuse and neglect, then there may be a time to think about a move to another care home. Again, not simple at all, because it's not simple to find care homes. Even with nursing home care compare, with all the flaws in it, there's some good things in it, but there's a lot of flaws, and I wrote a whole report just about that. The good, the bad, and the ugly about nursing home care compare. 5-star quality rating system. There's some deadly neglect also in 5-star nursing homes. So another thing is to consider installing camera in the bedroom, but you have to meet state regulations, because guess what? There could be a roommate. There could be issues of privacy, consent, and dignity. And we need to factor everything. And again, in assisted living, in many states, the requirements vary tremendously. Some of them are self-serving for the industry, to the point that they have to put a sign on the door, and kind of takes away from the effect. And in my final report of the quality improvement project, I want to kind of wrap up in a minute here, because I want to leave time for questions and discussion. In my final report of my quality improvement project, I was funded by Connecticut Long-Term Care Ombudsman Program under Mairead Painter's leadership. There will be many, many recommendations about assistive technology that some of them I mentioned here. In terms of systems advocacy, I'm going to take just a minute. How do we get to a place where the federal regulators and the state regulators take this issue more seriously? Can they do a national data-driven campaign to raise awareness, educate, and to really instill the zero tolerance with regards to providers' responsibility and accountability, residents' rights, and holding providers accountable with meaningful, enforceable oversight? I want to mention in Connecticut 2012, a law, Connecticut again is very innovative, Connecticut Ombudsman, a law requiring annual in-service training for all staff in nursing home, not assisted living. Every other state needs to consider, I believe, passing a law that will require the same, but also not to forget the always elephant, the forgotten kid in the room, the assisted living sector that is highly for-profit and often weakly regulated. And there's a lot of neglect of care and also retaliation there as well. So again, know the difference between assisted living regulations and nursing home regulations, and advocate for increased funding for the Ombudsman program. And I know I didn't talk a lot about family councils, because again, it's not my expertise, but maybe others can help out during the discussion. I know I covered a lot of ground, and I'm sure I missed some things, and I'm sure I can learn a lot of things from you, from your lived experience. So I'm going to pause here, and we can perhaps open it in any way you want, Janine.
Thank you, Alon. That was a lot of information and it's a lot of good information. I know that we have some questions from our audience here. Jeremy Spiegel, are you there?
I am, and I was
You
just typing,
are.
but that's okay.
Did you want to ask your questions of Alon?
Sure. I'll let me hold on. I was actually just getting it up. So why don't
Alon,
we? What do
Jeremy
you?
has, sorry, Jeremy, I just want to introduce you. Jeremy and his brother Danny have formed a family council at their mother's long-term care home in Massachusetts.
Okay.
Go ahead,
thank
Jeremy.
Right. Well, one I think is more in your wheelhouse. One is more in the family council thing, and they're kind of broad, so you can feel free to talk as little or much as you want. So basically, what are the best options when the facility retaliates against family members who are functioning as resident representatives when they're trying to advocate for their loved ones? Some examples on limiting communication, not responding to emails, not replying to grievances, or saying that this doesn't count as a grievance. And I think this is in the category of, you hit the nail on the head when a recent email we got back, well, oh, I don't retaliate. How could you even suggest such a thing? That is, and then literally it's such a perfect example, I think, to most reasonable people. So what would you say are the best sort of options in that? And then, as I said, feel free to, you've mentioned a lot of things, so maybe it might just be a recap on part of this.
Right. Well, thank you for the question. I think many times the heart is care plan meetings. And bring everybody to the table, as I mentioned earlier. And so when you're bringing everybody to the table, then you have that everybody hears it, it's documented, there's an element of transparency. They can't say he said, she said, it's there. And I would say it's like, you wonder, if you email a care home and you express a concern, and they're not responding for a week or two, and you do it, you email again, they still so the next time you visit, if you live in the state and you live close by, you can ask for, I'm sorry?
Oh, that wasn't me.
You can ask for, depending, I don't know, your mother's condition, but she can ask and you can go together depending on the circumstances. And you can bring, if they continue to ignore, you can bring ombudsman. And then it's the ladder of escalation. So, I've sent an email, you sit in a care plan meeting, you say, I've sent an email and I didn't get a response. I followed up, there's no response. So, you kind of start to get a sense, are they truly cherishing input from families, or something else is going on? And so again, the ombudsman can educate about the right to voice those concerns, and the right for the grievances process. And once it's in a grievance, an official grievance, then it can trigger also the lack of meeting it, and that can trigger the oversight, because the ombudsman doesn't have enforcement capabilities. It's the state survey agency. The problem is that there's delayed investigations. So that's an issue as well. So I would say this: work collaboratively in the spirit of collaboration, from heart to heart. Find that internal advocate. Maybe you're being ignored by a particular manager, but maybe the social worker has your ear, or maybe your loved one knows someone they trust. So starting there, and starting and without trying to avoid the accusatory, going more in the collaborative spirit first, and documenting every single conversation when they start to ignore and dismiss and make all kinds of excuses. So I don't know if it answers your question, but yeah.
It does. There were some things that actually made me think in a couple of different ways. So thank you. I appreciate that. Okay. The second question is, when potential family council members are fearful of retaliation if they join a family council, what do you sort of say to sort of address that? I mean, literally I was actually thinking of probably sending some of that handout from the National Consumer Voice. Is there any particular bullet points that, I mean, I have some stuff in my own, but obviously you guys are fairly well versed. I mean, so if either of you wants to answer that, that's fine.
Mm-hmm. Do you want to take it, Janine? Or?
Sure. I'd be happy to. Jeremy, that actually happened to one of my family council members last year. She was stalked, walking around the nursing home, where our loved ones live, and she just put a stop to it really quickly. She wrote an email to the administrator, and she copied the ombudsman, and she copied the heads of the family council, and was very forthright. It was a short but impactful email, and it literally stopped the next day. The
Yeah.
administrator emailed back, said, I'll do some research on it, and then the activity just stopped. The stalking and the harassment stopped. Once you call them on it, there's an excellent chance that it will stop, because they see that you see, and that you're not afraid to call them on it. If
Yeah.
it doesn't, go ahead, Elon.
Yeah, so that's an excellent point. And some of the most experienced and strong advocates that I interviewed, they have no tolerance. They, it could be a young, inexperienced, ombudsman. They're learning the ropes. It could take 5 to 7 years. One ombudsman that worked as an ombudsman for over 30 years tell me it takes 5 to 7 years to learn the ropes of the ombudsman role. So with that in mind, some of the strong ombudsmen would immediately address it. If they know about it. If they're not informed, that's another thing. So if they interrupt in the resident council or they retaliate after, they immediately contact the administrator, and they will say, it came to my attention, so and so, and this will not be tolerated. I expect it when I come next time that it will, and if not, I will take it, there will be recourse. So they're like not having it. They're not having it. So the same, if it's strong ombudsman,
You say they're not having it. Who is they?
the ombudsman is saying, I'm not going to tolerate staff interrupting in a resident council, or controlling or influencing resident council, or intimidating and stuff like that. So the same can apply. This is just me extrapolating here. Strong ombudsman that is informed in time can help the family navigate that situation, because when some care homes do take notice, and some residents will CC, or family will CC the ombudsman, and the administrator doesn't know who is CC'd, and they will ask, who is that fifth person? And the ombudsman, the experienced, strong ombudsman, will say, it's me here.
Right.
She told me you'd be surprised how quickly issues are resolved that way. They don't want, because they don't want to go down that pathway. They much rather address the issue when it's small, because why is the ombudsman there? It's there to resolve problems and to help them, not to catch them, not to say gotcha and to cite them. They can't cite them anyways. It's to help improve things and catch things when they're small.
Thank you. I'll just sort of just say it more as an FYI, is that unfortunately that sort of depends on how strong the ombudsman is, and if the administrator has a chummy relationship with the ombudsman, or the ombudsman is literally doesn't know her stuff, then it's doesn't matter. I'm sorry to say that, but I'm just letting you know that.
No. I that's why I said I kept it throughout my presentation. I said
I know.
Experienced and professional ombudsman.
I agree. No, I definitely I know you were I'm just letting you know, it's unfortunate that in this case that's the issue. And I'll just quickly say that it's also people, when the administrator unfortunately is part of the trying to get the names of the family council members so they can go to them directly to sort of make the communication to stop the communication there is problematic. So I'm just letting you know that's the way that's sort of showing up at the moment.
Right, but again, let's just remember that retaliation is a form of abuse, and surveyors are required to cite it. And I'm well aware of the realities that it doesn't always happen. But I want to hear from others too. I see Janine is raising her hand, or others.
Yes, Janine, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Janine Pruitt. My sister's at Santa Rosa Post-Acute in California. And I'm sorry, this is the first time I've ever done Zoom, so I'm sure I've messed up and I've got my hand slapped. Okay.
You're doing great. You're doing great.
Anyway, what we experienced at Santa Rosa is there's a lot of family members. So I don't know, my sister, there's maybe 6 or 7 that are all related. Brothers, sisters, in-laws, uncles, and on and on. Well, they got mad. The main caregiver got really upset with my sister, and her treatment with my sister was the silent treatment. Well, not only her, but all 6 of them. So she didn't have to deal with one caregiver, it was the whole family that
Right.
was mad at her. And now, after listening to you, I dealt with it all wrong, but I ended it really quickly. They were all out in the hallway chit-chatting, and the head of the posse, I went up to her and I told her I wanted it to stop. And I said, that's fine if you're mad at my sister, but don't you get everybody else in your family involved. I said, she has MS and she didn't choose to get MS. And if you can't take care of her, you can't take care of anybody, because my sister's very easy to take care of. And I've had to tell them that 3 or 4 times, that if you can't take care of her, there's nobody you're going to be able to take care of.
Yeah.
And she's a reclusive. She's not like me. I'm known there as the bulldog, and that's fine by me. The administrator have told me, we call you the bulldog. Good. I was a catcher on a softball team and called a lot worse. I don't care. So I see now I handled that all wrong, because I should have probably written an email, but my sister feared more retaliation than just the silent treatment. But it never escalated, and it was water under the bridge when I walked out of the building. So,
Wow. Thank you
yeah.
for sharing that story. The
Yeah.
For you.
the silent treatment is a big one, because you could be a resident who was used to be greeted every morning with a hello
Mhm.
in the hallway, and now that staff member walks by the resident as if the resident is a chair,
Yeah.
and that's could be very harmful for the
The whole
resident.
family. I mean, 6 of them there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
But,
Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, I
I'm not
just
sure if that
wanted
was a
to,
question, but thank you for sharing that.
right. Well, I
Thanks,
know I
Janine.
probably dealt with it wrong. I probably should have wrote a letter and got a hold of ombudsman. Would have been a better way to do it?
Well, if you took care of it, then
Yeah.
but again,
Okay.
I would remember to document everything and
Okay.
kind of be with the finger on the pulse whether
Right.
there's some continuation. It looks like you're on top of it, so
Right.
kudos to
Well, I
you.
go and see her almost every day. So I'm they know me there. So
Mhm, mhm.
anyway, but
Thank you,
thank you. I
Janine.
just wanted to share, how it can be more than one also.
Right. And I want to mention
Yes.
that this is an opportunity to educate also, to actually do an education session, whether it's the ombudsman or a family member, to educate staff about those things we talked about, the rights, the responsibilities, the definition of retaliation, to show the video from Connecticut that is old, and we're hopefully going to be a new one. Hopefully there will be developed a new one, but there's one, 5 residents talk about it. So really, the more you talk about it, the more it cannot be denied, and then knowing the
Mhm.
rights.
Mhm.
So it looks like there's a room for education there, certainly.
Right, right. And at our facility also, I'm going to, at our family council, the ones that are going there mostly every day, I want to get a group of us and see if it's okay with other family members just to pop our heads in the door while we're there and say, hi, I'm Janine with the family council. How's your day going? And the ones of us that go there all the time, because we have 2 or 3 that are from out of state with their family members there, and there's nobody to ever check on them. And I don't mind, and I'm sure there's 3 or 4 other in our group that wouldn't mind just checking in on people to see how they're doing.
I love that, because a
So,
lot of residents
yeah.
are in advanced stage of dementia, or their voice is not heard. So in
Right.
resident council, the presidents I mentioned, the good president will go every month, every day, and they collect information from all the residents in the building, and they're organizing
Right.
it, they're prioritizing it, and they bring it to the resident council. The same, I don't see a reason why, unless there's a limit to that Janine can educate us about.
Right, yeah. That's gonna be, Janine, our goal at the next meeting is to get a group like that to go through the place when
Yes,
we're there.
we'll
So,
do that.
yeah.
Thank you, Janine.
Okay, thank
Um,
you.
You bet, you bet. Judy Anderson, thank you for your patience. You have a question?
Yes, I'm an ombudsman, and there's rampant retribution, retaliation in my facility. and that's against staff members also, because they've seen it happen, that other staff members have been fired if they have complaints, but it's really rampant from residents and their family members. There's fear from many of them, and I have heard some horrendous things and cannot get people to issue the reports or allow me to talk about it because of that fear, such that even the director has opposed my trying to start a family council. Yes, and attending a care plan meeting, and so on and so forth. So I'm actually feeling like there's a little bit of retaliation against me too.
Right.
And
So,
so I'm just trying to figure out what else I can do, since it starts at the top.
right. So a couple of things. First of all, not only residents have a right to form and participate in a resident council, families have a right to form and participate in a family council.
Yes,
So this could be a
yes,
violation. This could be a violation if it's a nursing home. It would be a violation of federal nursing regulations. To my knowledge.
absolutely. And I understand that. And so my supervisor called her and told her that it's allowable. The people that I've been talking to who are interested in it are kind of weak in terms of being strong enough to counter some of the forces they go against there.
Yeah.
I've witnessed that because they're fearful of the retribution.
Right, right. So you had mentioned staff fear retaliation. I actually I did another project on staff fear retaliation from like, I don't know, it was 50 nursing homes. And so they also have a story to tell. So it's a triangle. It's the resident fear retaliation, it's staff fear retaliation, and it's a family fear retaliation, right? And we have very little research, if at all, about family fear retaliation. That's the next thing we need to do. But with regards to staff fear retaliation, they oftentimes fear of their supervisors,
Yes,
co-workers, and managers, and many of them, very low income, they're being paid very little, they live from paycheck to paycheck. This is a serious threat. And so that's a real force. So it looks like there's something more from the gestalt of what you're telling me. I'm gathering that this is more systemic issue that happens here. This is not an isolated with one resident. It's more happening
correct.
at multiple levels. And so I think the ombudsman, and again, a good experience and professional ombudsman could help navigate it as a general complaint, what they call a group complaint or a general complaint, when it's a systemic issue, as opposed to a unique issue that is irrelevant to a particular resident. But it's a serious concern, and they sometimes witness mistreatment, and they won't speak up, the staff members, because
Correct. I've been doing this for 10 years. So, yes,
I'm sorry.
I've been doing this work for 10 years. So I've seen and heard a lot of good and bad over those years.
And what state are you?
Virginia.
Got it. Thank you.
Thank you,
so
Judy.
as I said at the beginning, the quality of care can only be as good as the quality of support and education for the care staff. They are the foundation. So how do we lift up? How do we empower? How do we give voice for staff members? How do we educate and support them, that their voice will be heard? In fact, a recent lawsuit ended up with a $5.2 million where a nurse was retaliated against after she refused to falsify records and to give double dosing for residents who were, I don't like the word agitated, but you get the idea. And the judge said, made this verdict of $5.2 million against the care home for retaliating against the nurse who was a whistleblower. So, but again, these are big words. And at the end of the day, oftentimes you don't have the bandwidth. You want to improve things right now. And you're concerned and you're overwhelmed and you're exhausted. And so is there a way to work collaboratively? Is there a way to work with an ombudsman to improve things, to bring the education, to support the staff, to lift their voice, and through that, to lift the voice of the residents?
Thank you. Thank you, Judy. We've got one more question. Randy from Iowa. Got your hand up?
Hi, yeah, sorry.
Hey.
I was just gonna say, I started a family council the beginning of this year, and we're still very much trying to grow our council. But we've had a few family members join. Um, but what made me really, I guess I just wanted to share what I have done. Um, and what I feel kind of helped resolve some of the things that we were having in our situation. But with working with the ombudsman that we had in my area, but she has since retired, she actually kind of encouraged me to just report things to the state, to our DIA state. And so I guess I don't know how all the rest of you feel about that, but I simply filed complaints to the state office, and they came and did a complaint investigation. And I turned over, because I'm very much a documenter. I'm a nurse, and so that's just part of what we have to do in my profession anyways. And so I did turn over everything that I had documented with things that we had. My own family was going through what we felt was retaliation, because my mother-in-law was being required to stay with my father-in-law, who's in the nursing home with dementia. She was being required to stay with him from when he woke up in the morning until the end of the day when he went to bed. And of course, that is, nursing homes can't make family do that. The fact that my mother-in-law did it for about a month and a half before we finally put a stop to it. But yeah, there were probably 4 or 5 different complaints that I submitted to our state office. And yes, we worried about retaliation from the nursing home on the fact that we were filing a complaint. And my mother-in-law feared that that my father-in-law would get kicked out. But I just reminded her, like, well, if they dare try to kick us out or kick him out, that is retaliation. They can't do that. And I guess I just want to say and encourage anyone to just go to your state office and file a complaint to, if that's what needs to be done, to hold that accountability. Because
Right.
that did resolve a lot of our issue, not every issue, but I think I think it was like 5 complaints that we submitted. And of those 5, I want to say 3 of them were founded. They were substantiated. The other 2, even though we felt they should have been substantiated, they of course do their interviews with the nurse, the staff and the administrator and all that. Even though we felt we provided substantiated evidence of it, it didn't go in our favor, but at least we had some sort of resolution.
Right.
So
That's wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. In your case, it seems like, and there's continuation of that positive change. You think those things are resolved and not reappearing?
yeah.
And in
Yeah.
what state are you? In what state are you? Are you able to share?
I'm in Iowa.
Oh, you mentioned, sorry. Yeah, so, with the state survey agency, as I mentioned, there's a great variation of their capabilities. And some of the complaints we hear, some of them are responding quickly and they're professional, and others are very understaffed. They don't have the manpower, they don't have the training, there's a lot of instability. So they're coming several months later or a few months later. And at that point, to collect sufficient evidence to substantiate something for different reasons that some of them we mentioned earlier could be very difficult. And so it really depends on how strong and how responsive and how attentive and how professional that state survey agency / particular surveyor who is coming to do the investigation. There could also be, I'm not here to scare people, but there could also be retaliation after substantiation because yeah, sometimes they do that too. And also, let's remember again the difference between assisted living and nursing home. In nursing home, there's 6 criteria that a nursing home must demonstrate in order to discharge a person. And there's hearing rights, there right to appeal, there's 30-day notice, there's this and that. In assisted living in many states, it could be for literally, I'm taking it from one state, for any reason. for any other reason. And they make up, and so you say, oh, he's difficult. Was he really difficult, or you're understaffed and you're not training your staff? And you have 80% agency staff. So that's an issue. So state survey agency, yes, it's an option as long as you have realistic expectations of what they can and cannot do. So thank you for bringing that up.
Thank you, Alon. And thank you, Janine and Jeremy and Randy and Tracy. I will get to your question later on. We've gone over, but these were really good questions. This is a really good presentation. Retaliation is really, it is something that is alive and well in most long-term care homes. So we're here to help. Thank you. Thank you, Sheila. And Alon, thank you for your presentation and for your work on this. I hope to work with you more, especially on family councils, because we are an effective change maker.
Yeah, I have a lot to learn. And
thank you.
So thank you, Jenny, and thank you, Haley, for organizing this. And I'm happy to share my slides. There's some resources there that folks might find helpful, so we can discuss this afterwards, maybe.
Thanks, Alon. And I'll post the video by tomorrow, probably a recording of today's video, and I'll include your slides on that page.
Okay, thank you all for joining us today.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks. Enjoy the weather. Bye.